But topping our news tonight is the death of a rising country music star. Keith Whitley was found dead in his Goodlettsville home just after noon today. At this point, his death is a mystery to police. Barb Kramer reports.
Keith Whitley was one of country music's brightest stars, a voice so powerful and soulful that many believed he was destined to change the genre forever. But in 1989, at just 34 years old, his life was cut tragically short under circumstances that left fans heartbroken and suspicious. For decades, questions swirled around his untimely death. Was it really just alcohol? Or was there something more hidden beneath the surface? Now, after years of speculation, new revelations have finally come to light. The Keith Whitley mystery has been cracked, and what investigators uncovered will leave you absolutely stunned. Join us in this video as we reveal the details of Keith Whitley's mysterious death. Keith Whitley's mysterious death finally solved. By the spring of 1989, Keith Whitley seemed to have it all. His album, Don't Close Your Eyes, had skyrocketed him into country music superstardom, and his voice carried the kind of raw emotion that instantly drew people in. He had just finished a successful tour. His marriage to fellow artist Lori Morgan was stabilizing after a rocky beginning, and at home, the couple was celebrating the joys of raising their baby boy. On the surface, life looked golden. A new album was on the horizon, and Keith's future appeared brighter than ever. But behind the curtain of fame and family life, Keith was fighting a battle that had haunted him since his teenage years in Sandy Hook, Kentucky. Alcohol wasn't just a bad habit, it was an anchor tied to his identity. Friends and family were well aware of his struggles. He'd entered rehab, made heartfelt promises, and even experienced long stretches of sobriety. Yet the cycle always returned. Whenever pressure mounted or loneliness crept in, the bottle was waiting. And though his voice grew deeper, richer, and more admired, inside, Keith felt more hollow than ever. By May of 1989, that hidden battle had returned full force. With Lori away performing in Alaska, Keith had a weekend to himself in Nashville. Outwardly, he seemed fine. He played golf, laughed with friends, and even spoke optimistically about new songs he wanted to write. On the phone with Lori, he reassured her, "I love you, babe. You're going to be great." It sounded like the voice of a man with hope, not despair. But addiction is deceptive. It rarely makes noise. It whispers quietly, pulling its victim deeper without warning. On the morning of May 9th, Keith's brother-in-law stopped by his home in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. They shared coffee, made small talk, and Keith mentioned more songwriting plans and maybe another round of golf later. Nothing seemed unusual. Palmer left, but when he returned less than 2 hours later, everything had changed. Keith was still in bed. But something was wrong. His body was cold, unresponsive. The paramedics arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. At just 34 years old, one of country music's brightest stars was gone. The official cause of death? Acute alcohol poisoning. His blood alcohol level was measured at 0.477, nearly 5 times the legal limit to drive and high enough to be instantly fatal, even for someone with his tolerance. It was the equivalent of 20 drinks still in his system. There were no signs of foul play, no overdose, no self-harm note, just a body that had finally reached its limit. Keith Whitley's story ended on that quiet Tuesday morning, but the mystery of how someone with so much promise, love, and talent could be consumed so completely by his demons was only beginning. But what can really be said about the sudden death of Keith Whitley? Keep watching to find out. the silence that still echoes. Keith Whitley didn't die because he was weak. He died because addiction is ruthless. It doesn't care if you're a rising star, a devoted husband, or a loving father. It doesn't spare you just because you can play a guitar like no one else or write songs that touch millions of hearts. Addiction is merciless, and Keith's story is proof of that. For all his talent, Keith couldn't outrun the shadows he carried. His voice, often praised for its haunting emotion, wasn't just artistry. It was lived experience. The heartbreak in his songs wasn't imagined. It was the soundtrack of a man fighting battles most people never saw. Sometimes, the saddest songs aren't written. They're lived. And in Keith's case, the final chapter wasn't a verse or a chorus, but silence. No farewell song, no closing words. Just an unfinished melody that still hangs in the air more than 3 decades later. His absence left a void in country music, one that artists and fans still feel. Even now, every time one of his songs plays, there's a reminder of what was lost and of the story that still feels unfinished. Following his death, how did the world at large digest the information of his passing? Stay tuned to find out. A voice frozen in time. The country music world was blindsided. Just days before his death, Keith Whitley had been talking with Garth Brooks about touring together. He was preparing to finally step onto the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, a dream he had chased since he was a boy in Kentucky. RCA Records had placed its faith in him as the future of traditional country music. And then, without warning, he was gone. At his funeral, the grief was overwhelming. Fans and artists traveled from across the nation to say goodbye. Ricky Skaggs delivered the eulogy, his voice heavy with emotion. And in one of the most heartbreaking moments, Lorrie Morgan, shattered and barely able to stand, placed a single red rose in Keith's casket and whispered softly, "I will always love you." In the weeks that followed, the industry tried to honor him the only way it knew how, through music. Keith's final tracks, including the haunting "I'm Over You," were released posthumously, sounding more like a farewell than anyone had realized at the time. RCA rushed to compile tribute albums. Fellow artists covered his songs, and for the next year, radio stations filled the air with his voice. A voice now frozen in time. Lorrie Morgan carried his memory forward, recording duets with his old demos and producing the 1990 tribute album Keith Whitley, a tribute album featuring stars like Alan Jackson, Diamond Rio, and Garth Brooks. Yet for those closest to Keith, the music was not enough. The silence he left behind, the absence of the man himself, was far more painful than any empty stage or lost record deal. Keith hadn't just been an artist. He had been a friend, a husband, a father, and a fighter. And suddenly, all of that was gone. Before Keith Whitley became the legendary musician whose life was cut short, who was he even before the fame? Let's find out. Roots of a rebel voice. Keith Whitley was born in Ashland, Kentucky, to Fay Ferguson, the editor of the Elliott County News, and Elmer Whitley, an electrician. But it was the small town of Sandy Hook, just 46 miles away, where Keith was truly raised and where the foundation of his life and his struggles was built. Growing up alongside his siblings Randy, Dwight, and Mary, Keith came from a family deeply rooted in the hills of Kentucky. Their English and Scots-Irish heritage stretched back in Elliott County to the 1840s, giving Keith a strong tie to the land and its traditions. Life in Sandy Hook wasn't quiet or easy. As a teenager, Keith and his friends often filled their nights with bootleg bourbon and reckless joyrides on twisting mountain roads. It was a dangerous pastime that left scars. In one incident, a car he was riding in took a curve at 120 miles per hour. The crash claimed his friend's life and nearly broke Keith's neck. In another, Keith himself drove off a 120-foot cliff into a frozen river. Miraculously, he walked away with only a broken collarbone. These brushes with death gave him a reputation for being wild, but they also hinted at the darker battles he would later face. Tragedy hit closer to home in 1983, when Keith's older brother Randy passed on in a motorcycle accident. It was a loss that weighed heavily on him, adding to the pain he often drowned in music, and, later, alcohol. Music, however, was the one place Keith always found his true voice. He began his career rooted in Kentucky bluegrass, performing with Ralph Stanley's Clinch Mountain Boys, where his raw talent quickly stood out. Over time, he transitioned to the neo-traditional country and honky-tonk sound that would define his career. Influenced by legends like Hank Williams, George Jones, Merle Haggard, Lefty Frizzle, and of course, Ralph Stanley, Keith developed a style that blended Appalachian soul with classic country grit. It was a voice born from both tradition and turmoil, one that carried the echoes of his heritage, the risks of his youth, and the heartbreaks that shaped him. A voice that the world would come to love, even as the man behind it struggled to survive. So, how did the wild Keith Whitley rise to become a country music icon? Keep watching to find out. From small-town stages to country stardom, Keith Whitley's journey from the hills of Kentucky to the spotlight of Nashville was the stuff of legend. His first taste of the stage came in 1969, when he entered a local music contest in Ezzle, Kentucky. Keith sang while his brother Dwight picked the banjo, and fate placed another young contender in the room, Ricky Skaggs. The two teenagers instantly bonded, sparking a lifelong friendship that would shape the future of country music. Not long after, a twist of luck changed everything. In Fort Gay, West Virginia, Ralph Stanley was running late for a show due to a flat tire. When he finally arrived and walked into the club, he thought he was hearing the Stanley brothers on a jukebox. Instead, it was 16-year-old Whitley and Skaggs, whose harmonies were so uncanny that Stanley immediately knew he had found something special. Before long, both boys were invited to join his band, the Clinch Mountain Boys. By 1974, Keith had become Stanley's lead singer, carving out a reputation as one of the most promising young voices in bluegrass. The 1970s saw Whitley expanding his craft, performing with J.D. Crowe and the New South. His versatility, emotional depth, and command of a song made him one of the standout lead singers in bluegrass. He absorbed influences from the legends, Carter Stanley's soul, Lefty Frizzell's phrasing, Hank Williams's raw emotion, George Jones's heartbreak, and Merle Haggard's grit. By the time Keith moved to Nashville in 1983, he wasn't just a talented singer. He was a force ready to make his mark. His first solo album, A Hard Act to Follow, released in 1984, leaned into mainstream country but felt inconsistent, as though Keith was still searching for his true sound. Critics were lukewarm, but Keith pressed forward, refining his style and voice. His 1985 follow-up, L.A. to Miami, marked a turning point. It gave him his first top 20 hit with Miami, My Amy, followed by 10 Feet Away, Homecoming 63, and Hard Livin'. The album also featured On the Other Hand and Nobody in His Right Mind Would Have Left Her, songs that became major hits for Randy Travis and George Strait after Keith's versions were left unreleased. Still, Keith's name was now climbing steadily, his sound sharpening with each record. It was during this period, while promoting L.A. to Miami, that Keith met country singer Lorrie Morgan. The two quickly fell in love, marrying in November 1986. They welcomed their son, Jesse Keith Whitley, in June 1987, and Keith also adopted Laurie's daughter Morgan from her previous marriage. For a time, life seemed stable: family, career, and a future full of promise. By 1987, Keith was ready to push harder for artistic control. Unhappy with the quality of songs RCA was feeding him, he asked to shelve a 15-track project and demanded more say in both songwriting and production. The result was the 1988 masterpiece, Don't Close Your Eyes. This was the album that finally captured the full power of Keith Whitley. It included songs he had worked on during his Tree Publishing days, like It's All Coming Back to Me Now, and his spine-tingling cover of Lefty Frizzell's I Never Go Around Mirrors. But it was the singles that cemented his place in history. When You Say Nothing at All, I'm No Stranger to the Rain, and the title track, Don't Close Your Eyes, all shot to #1 on the Billboard country charts between late 1988 and early 1989. Don't Close Your Eyes was crowned Billboard's #1 country song of 1988, and I'm No Stranger to the Rain earned him his first Country Music Association award as a solo artist, along with a Grammy nomination. Finally, the industry and the fans recognized the genius that had been building for years. In early 1989, Keith was already looking ahead. He pitched the idea of releasing I Never Go Around Mirrors as a single, but RCA chairman Joe Galante pushed him towards something fresh and upbeat. The result was I Wonder Do You Think of Me, which would become the centerpiece of his planned next album. He was also preparing to achieve one of his lifelong dreams, an invitation to join the Grand Ole Opry, scheduled for late May of that year. But tragically, Keith would never live to see that dream come true. His final concert was held on May 6, 1989, at the Armadillo Ballroom in Brazoria, Texas. Just 3 days later, on May 9th, his life ended in Nashville at the age of 34. Keith Whitley's story is one of staggering talent, haunting music, and dreams both fulfilled and cut short. And yet, behind his career's triumphs, the mystery of his struggles and what they truly meant remained unanswered for years. But how exactly did Keith Whitley find and meet the love of his life? Who would stand by his side until his very end? Keep watching to find out. A love written in song. Keith Whitley and Lorrie Morgan's story began in the early 1980s, when fate brought them together at a mutual friend's party. It was the kind of meeting that seemed ordinary at first, but soon became life-changing. Their shared passion for music became the bridge that connected them, sparking a whirlwind romance that grew quickly and deeply. By September 22, 1986, the two were married, and country music had a new power couple whose love seemed as strong as the songs they sang. What made their bond unique was their mutual understanding of the music world. Both were artists fighting to carve out a place in Nashville's fiercely competitive industry. Lorrie was rising in her career, finding her own voice, while Keith was on the cusp of superstardom. But instead of competing with one another, they leaned into the partnership. Lorrie often credited Keith with giving her the courage to find her true artistic identity. Their relationship wasn't just about romance. It was about creating, inspiring, and pushing each other to be better. Keith's music during those years reflected their bond. His songs carried the tenderness, devotion, and struggle that came from loving fiercely while living under the weight of fame. Many of his most cherished ballads drew directly from the passion and vulnerability he shared with Lorrie. In turn, Lorrie became not only his wife, but his confidant, someone who understood the pressures he carried and stood by him as he chased his dreams. But love, no matter how strong, cannot erase demons. Their marriage was marked by turbulence, much of it driven by Keith's ongoing battle with alcoholism. Lori tried with all her strength to help him overcome it. She encouraged him through rehab, supported his stretches of sobriety, and refused to give up on the man she knew underneath the struggle. Yet, the pressures of the music industry, endless tours, expectations, and the demand for perfection piled onto the personal battles Keith already carried. The result was a home life that oscillated between moments of tenderness and periods of deep strain. Even through the struggles, their connection never truly broke. Friends recalled how Lori's devotion to Keith was unwavering, how she stood beside him at his highest moments and tried to steady him during his darkest ones. When his music soared, she celebrated. When he stumbled, she carried the weight. For Keith, she was both a safe place and a source of strength, even when he couldn't always rise above his own pain. Tragedy struck in May of 1989 when Keith's life was cut short at just 34 years old. Lori, who had built dreams of a lifetime with him, was left shattered. At his funeral, she placed a single red rose in his casket and whispered, "I will always love you." It was a gesture that spoke not only to her grief, but also to the depth of their love. A love that had been tested by hardship, fueled by passion, and immortalized in song. For Lori Morgan, the years with Keith would always remain the most defining chapter of her life. Their story was not a fairy tale, but a real, raw, and unforgettable love that continues to echo through country music history. How was Lori Morgan able to carry on after the death of her beloved Keith Whitley? Stay tuned to find out. Carrying the torch. After Keith's death, Lori Morgan was left facing an unimaginable loss. The man she loved, the partner she had built her life around, was suddenly gone, leaving her to navigate both grief and a future she never expected to face alone. In the weeks and months that followed, Lori stepped away from the spotlight, taking time to mourn, reflect, and try to make sense of the heartbreak. For her, healing did not come quickly. The silence of his absence was deafening, and the memories of their life together weighed heavily on her heart. Music soon became her lifeline. Lori discovered that writing and performing were not just part of her career, but also her therapy. Every note, every lyric, became a way to process the pain that words alone could not capture. She has often spoken candidly about those years of grief, describing how Keith's memory remained ever present, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. His influence continued to inspire her both as an artist and as a person, shaping the path she would follow. In the years after Keith's passing, Lori Morgan built a career that stood firmly on its own. She released numerous albums that resonated with fans who admired both her voice and her resilience. Her music earned her awards and critical acclaim, solidifying her place as one of the leading women in country music. Yet, even as she achieved success in her own right, she never let go of Keith's story. On stage and in interviews, she often honored his memory, weaving his name and songs into her performances. Tribute albums, duets created from Keith's old demos, and her candid reflections on their life together kept his spirit alive in the hearts of fans. Through her artistry, she ensured that Keith was not just remembered as a tragic loss, but as a man whose talent and love left an indelible mark on the world. For Lori, resilience and dedication to her craft became a way to honor both her journey and Keith's legacy. Their love story, marked by both passion and pain, continues to echo through her songs and her presence on stage. Even decades later, she reminds audiences that Keith Whitley's impact didn't end with his passing. It lives on through the music, the memories, and the love they shared. So, how did the people close to Keith Whitley honor his memory over the years? Let's find out. Honoring Keith's memory. Even decades after his passing, Lorrie Morgan continues to honor the memory of her late husband, Keith Whitley. On Saturday, May 10th, the Something in Red singer reminded fans of just how deep that love still runs when she shared a moving video compilation on Facebook. In the video, Lorrie visited Keith's grave with her family, including their son, Jesse Keith Whitley. With the simple yet heartbreaking caption, "Missing Keith Whitley," the post captured a quiet, intimate moment of remembrance. The clips, which appeared to be flashbacks from May 9, 2023, were accompanied by the words, "Remember when." They showed Lorrie, Jesse, now 37, and other family members gathered around a picnic blanket at the cemetery. Alongside them were images of Keith's headstone and what looked to be Lorrie's future resting place beside him. The family, though grieving, seemed to find comfort in one another's company, sharing food and memories as they picnicked near Keith's final resting place. It was a scene both tender and bittersweet, one that highlighted how, even in death, Keith remains a central part of their family's life. Keith Whitley left behind a legacy that continues to shape country music. His induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2022 was proof of his lasting influence. At the ceremony, Lorrie stood on stage and delivered a heartfelt tribute, noting that Keith never knew how good he was. She recalled how he often doubted himself, never believing that he could measure up to others in the industry, even as his songs were touching millions of listeners. "He would be absolutely blown away if he were here today," she said. "He would be saying that surely they got it wrong." Their son Jesse also spoke during the ceremony, proudly carrying on his father's legacy. "He's got the best sad songs and love songs ever," Jesse told the crowd. "If you want a history lesson in country music, that's who you need to listen to." For Jesse, Keith was not only a father but also a teacher through his music, an artist whose voice still carries the soul of an entire genre. Lorrie herself has endured her share of personal trials in the years since Keith's death. In April 2024, she faced another difficult chapter when her current husband, entrepreneur Randy White, was hospitalized amid his ongoing battle with mouth cancer. Lorrie's manager, Tony Conway, announced at the time that she had canceled all concerts and appearances for 2 weeks to remain by his side. The statement read, "Morgan's husband of nearly 15 years, Randy White, has been undergoing treatment for mouth cancer. White has been readmitted to a hospital in Middle Tennessee. A month later, Lorrie shared her own words, expressing gratitude for the prayers and support from fans while also asking for privacy. We deeply appreciate the prayers and well wishes and for continued support and privacy as we focus on Randy's health and on our family at this time," she said. By December 2024, she offered a hopeful update on Facebook, writing that White was making some progress. Her post ended on a note of love and determination. "We are strong, and he is determined." "I love you," Ran Lorrie and Randy White, who tied the knot in a private beachside ceremony in September 2010, have built a life rooted in resilience, love, and faith. For Lorrie, honoring her past with Keith while standing strong for her present with Randy reflects both the depth of her heart and the strength of her spirit. She remains a woman shaped by great love and great loss, carrying Keith's legacy forward while also protecting and cherishing the family she has today. How has Keith Whitley's legacy endured? Keep watching to find out. The legacy that refused to fade. Over the years, Hollywood has flirted with the idea of bringing Keith Whitley's story to the big screen. But so far, none of those projects have actually made it to production. One of the earliest ideas was a film adaptation of Forever Yours Faithfully, the book co-written by Lorrie Morgan and George Vesey. The book itself became an emotional cornerstone for fans, offering a deeply personal look into Whitley's final moments and the raw truth of his battles. But when it came to capturing his story in film, even more groundwork was laid for a project titled Kentucky Bluebird. This ambitious attempt was set to star actor and director David Keith, and it promised to dive deep into Whitley's life and legacy. Yet, like so many dreams surrounding Keith, it never quite materialized, leaving fans with the haunting thought of what such a film might have revealed about the man behind the music. Despite his short career, Keith Whitley's influence has only grown stronger with time. His induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2022 was a long-awaited recognition that confirmed what fans and fellow musicians had known all along, that his voice, his songs, and his presence were far too powerful to be forgotten. Before that honor, Whitley was celebrated through a special exhibit that chronicled his life, music, and enduring mark on country history. His reach extends far beyond those early years. Modern country legends like Tim McGraw, Ronnie Dunn, and Dierks Bentley have all pointed to Whitley as a source of inspiration, proof that his artistry continues to ripple through the genre decades later. Even the new generation has carried his torch. Morgan Wallen, one of country's biggest stars today, included a track titled Keith Whitley on his 2023 double album One Thing at a Time. The song not only paid tribute to the late singer, but also earned the heartfelt approval of both Lorrie Morgan and Jesse Keith Whitley, showing that Keith's legacy still resonates deeply with fans and family alike. And yet, perhaps the most poignant recognition came from the Grand Ole Opry itself. Whitley was scheduled to appear at the Opry in late May 1989, where management had planned to extend the official invitation for him to join its prestigious ranks. But fate intervened, and Keith passed away on May 9th, just weeks before that milestone could happen. The Opry has always held a strict policy of only inducting living artists, which meant Keith's membership was quietly erased from the schedule, another dream left unfinished. That is, until October 14th, 2023. On that night, during a Keith Whitley tribute show at the Opry, Garth Brooks and Lorrie Morgan stepped forward with an announcement that finally set things right. They revealed that Whitley's name would be engraved on a plaque and included in the Opry's member gallery backstage, placed among every artist who had ever graced its legendary stage since 1925. Though he never lived to hold the title, Whitley became the only person posthumously recognized as a former Opry member, an honor that sealed his place in country music's sacred history. Keith Whitley may have left the world too soon, but his story refuses to fade. From failed movie projects to tribute songs, from museum exhibits to a belated Opry acknowledgement, his name continues to echo where it matters most, in the hearts of fans, the music of future generations, and the sacred halls of country tradition. What are your thoughts on the mystery behind Keith Whitley's death? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.